What's up YouTube, Zazubaar here, and welcome yet again to Zmmr. Cloverfield is without a doubt the most interesting and unique monster movie I've ever seen. It doesn't follow traditional filmmaking methods by being shot to look like it was recorded by your average New Yorker with a camcorder, and it breaks some trends seen in a lot of monster movies, particularly giant monster movies, like seeing how the monster looks from the perspective of people at street level and not focusing the shots on the monster above the buildings just roaring, although that is in there as well. Cloverfield is basically taking this scene from the original Gojira, where Godzilla attacks the heart of Tokyo for the first time, and seeing it the whole time from average bystanders who don't know what the hell is going on. Although in Gojira, people were hearing about Godzilla's impending attack over the radio. The fact that Cloverfield feels a lot like the original Gojira, or maybe a better way to put it is the Godzilla series in general, is no accident. Producer J.J. Abrams came up with the idea for Cloverfield by seeing that even over 56 years after he was initially introduced, Godzilla is still all over toy stores in Japan, and hell, even the US. I was recently in a Toys R Us with a friend of mine, and we were surprised to see a rather large Godzilla section from Bandai. This got Abrams thinking that aside from King Kong, the US film industry never really gave America its own giant monster to fear or associate with the destructions of its own cities. Now, I know what a lot of my hardcore monster fans are saying. King Kong is an American icon, and he's a giant monster. A few years ago, when Cloverfield first came out, and I heard Abrams say this, I agreed with you. But now I think I get what Abrams is saying. Kong did cause some damage to Manhattan when he arrived, but it wasn't there to make the audience fear Kong. It was for spectacle and finality. When Godzilla attacks Tokyo or any other Japanese city, it is for fear. And not to say that it isn't spectacular to watch, but Godzilla was born out of a real-life fear, nuclear weapons. And that's what makes Kong and Godzilla different types of monsters. Kong is a monster born of spectacle, and Godzilla is a monster born of fear. Cloverfield and its monster are meant to scare, not amaze, scare, which is what makes Cloverfield more like an Americanized Godzilla than, well, the Americanized Godzilla. However, Cloverfield is about a different sort of fear, or maybe situations brought out of the horrificness of the monster. Cloverfield shows people who are everyday Americans and didn't see this tragedy coming, and the film shows how they deal with the situations brought about by the monster attack. Cloverfield brings about a question that everyone asks themselves or others. What would you do if? In this case, what would you do if a giant monster attacked your home city? Which, although not a hugely realistic situation, is definitely one worth thinking about. But maybe Cloverfield is about more than what your average Roland Emmerich disaster movie is about. Maybe it's even an allegory for something, like all great giant monster movies are. Now, before we go any further, I believe I should get a really quick plot synopsis out of the way, since there's a lot I want to talk about in this review, and Cloverfield's plot is perfectly simple for this sort of movie, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time summarizing a simple plot. The best way I can describe Cloverfield is as a roller coaster ride of a film. As with a roller coaster, Cloverfield starts out slow with a quiet ascent from normal to crazy. The film opens with New Yorkers in their 20s who look like they were stolen from an American Eagle commercial, throwing a going-away party for their friend Rob Hawkins, who is leaving the U.S. to be a vice president for a company in where else but Japan, which is of course a very subtle yet clear nod to the Big G. The party is being shot by Rob's friend Hud, not kidding, that's his name, who is kind of like a totally Manhattanized version of Seth Rogen, who will be the perspective we see the attack happen from for the majority of the movie. Yay! However, the party is cut short when the monster strolls into town and decides to see how far he can throw the head of Lady Liberty. Our protagonists run away from from the really horrific destruction we see, which is also really realistic, and run from the Brooklyn Bridge to the subway to Penn Station to Columbus Circle, and finally fly to Central Park, where we see the monster the most clearly, and see him soon after eat HUD. However, the movie isn't over yet. Rob just picks up the camera and starts filming his and his girlfriend's goodbye to each other, ending with the two being crushed under a bridge. One thing I'm sure you've all noticed about Zmmr is that I talk a lot about monster movies being allegories, and commenting on how subtle and effective they are as allegories. Cloverfield is not an obvious allegory by any means, since it's mostly just trying to be a very scary, intense, and unique horror film. But it is an allegory for something pretty controversial. The production team has gone on record as saying that a lot of the destruction scenes in the movie are based on videos taken by pedestrians of the 9/11 tragedy that can be found on YouTube. Scenes like the one right after the Statue of Liberty's head is thrown, where a building down the street crumbles and dust engulfs the people in the street, is uncannily similar to videos of the World Trade Center collapsing and dust covering the surrounding streets. Which is why I say the destruction in Cloverfield is pretty realistic. When a building falls, it doesn't just crumble apart. The pieces of the building itself usually crumble apart and turn into a dust cloud that can engulf an entire street. Which is exactly what we see in Cloverfield in the scene I just mentioned. However, it would be kind of unfair to just put Cloverfield together with the 9/11 tragedy and say that that's all it's allegorizing. The monster attack seems to represent any disaster that no one saw coming. Which is why this film starts where it does, with the party and seeing what normal New Yorkers do, and then seeing how they react when their normal lives are shattered with the sudden monster attack. When watching the scenes at Rob's party, it feels like watching a video of any other party with drama, people dancing, people arguing, and people getting drunk and passing out. We could be watching any other party in the world at this time, and we'd probably barely notice the change. And when the attack happens, we don't really see it coming because we're used to the normality of the party environment. It's very effective and scary to see these people's lives just shattered with the monster attack. It makes the movie and people feel more real, that they were doing something so ordinary when the disaster happened, and only strengthens this movie's question. What would you do if your city was attacked by a giant monster while you were going about your daily life? Well, I would say that my first instinct would be to get the hell out of the city, which these people try to do. What I also like is that when they're trying to decide how the hell to get out of Manhattan, there's a quick argument on which bridge to take. One problem a lot of people have with this movie is that our protagonists are very stereotypical New Yorkers in their 20s, and we don't really care what happens to them. I agree with this to a point. Like, unfortunately, I wasn't very attached to HUD, the guy we were supposed to be seeing the event from, which I find very problematic. He gets very annoying after a few jokes from him, and is the only person who doesn't feel very real because he's filming the frickin' everything. Look, I appreciate the moment where Rob asks him, "Why are you still filming?" to which HUD replies, "People are going to know how it all went down, and that hearing about it isn't enough, that they need to see it." But has HUD ever heard of a news broadcast, which we see a few times, who are also getting a lot better footage than he is of the monster itself and of the damage it's already causing? What makes his point of view so damn special? To which you could reply, because they're normal people who were caught off guard by his attack. Well, if that's the reason, why not see it from the perspective of a family with a child in it who has some kind of disease? Which I think sounds much more interesting. What the movie tries to make interesting about these people is that Rob and this girl Beth are in love and don't want to tell each other. So they get into a fight at the party and Beth leaves. Once the monster attacks, Rob gets all concerned about her and freaks out when he hears that she can't get out of her area. So he drags everyone with him to try and get her out of the city. I don't find this interesting at all. I find it boring and unnecessary since the simple solution would have just been communication. The only reason the two got into a fight in the first place was because Rob never called Beth after they slept together for the first time. A few questions. Why didn't he call her? Why didn't she just try and call him? And the biggest one of all, why should I care? There's a monster attacking Manhattan and I have to watch an episode of Jersey Shore instead of one of the scariest monsters I've ever seen in a movie. It may be there to make Rob and his friends feel more like real New Yorkers, but all it does is make me bored, which is another problem I have with Cloverfield. It's pacing. The beginning is the biggest problem. We spend a little too much time with the people at the party than I care to. Setting up this feeling of normality should have only taken 10 to 15 minutes. Yet we get about 20 minutes of this party and see and hear a lot of stuff that's not necessary. Like seeing HUD interviewing people at the party on how much they're going to miss Rob, and seeing HUD hitting on this girl Marlena. I wish this time wasn't spent on making it seem like these people have complicated lives, but instead on making them likable, which this opening doesn't even come close to doing. In fact, Rob's brother Jason even says, "Look, Rob, I love you, but you're a bit of a douchebag." I love it when a movie's dialogue tells you guys what's wrong with the movie for me. However, what all of this complicated backstory for Rob and Beth's relationship does accomplish is working up to answering the question this movie poses. What would you do if a monster attacked your city while you were going about your daily life? Well, Rob's daily life is interrupted with Beth being in danger because of the monster attack. So, what does he decide to do? Go and rescue her, or think about himself and evacuate? Rob decides to go and rescue her, and his friends decide to go with him. However, once we get off the Brooklyn Bridge, the pacing improves drastically, and we see enough of the monster to want to know more about it, but not too much so when it does show up, you're generally surprised and still frightened of it. It shares that in common with Jaws. The way you need to watch Cloverfield and fully understand Cloverfield's purpose is to turn your brain off as soon as the opening scene starts, to just let yourself be taken in by the screen. Now, I'm not saying Cloverfield is a dumb movie that insults your intelligence. I'm saying that it's better for your enjoyment of it to just take in what the movie is presenting and then think about it when it's over. So Cloverfield is a movie to make you think just after it's over. Its purpose is to make you feel like you are Rob and his friends, and see the decisions they make in terms of the situation. And then once the movie ends, to think about what you would do in that situation. Now, I did talk about a lot of problems Cloverfield has, and I think I'm giving you guys the wrong impression. Cloverfield really works for me as a modern monster movie. So let's talk about what this movie does right. I already talked about how it makes you think after it's over, which is one of the scariest and most memorable things about it to me. But I haven't talked about the monster itself a whole lot in this review. Well, I love the design and everything else about it. It's a really unique sort of creature, which is perfect for such a unique monster movie. It walks on all fours, or however many legs it has. It's not really clear, which makes it feel very alien and asks more questions about it, where the hell it came from. The roar is probably my second favorite monster roar of all time, next to Godzilla's. Seriously, when I first saw this movie, I shivered every time I heard that roar. The parasites were another thing I found fascinating, which is the film's clue to where the monster came from, the sea. The things function a lot like barnacles on whales. They travel on the monster's back, and when the monster goes near a place with a food supply, Manhattan, they jump off and start feasting. I don't know why people explode if they get bitten and survive, but that's one aspect of the movie I found really confusing. What's also really well done, as I mentioned, is that we see the monster only about 10 times throughout the film, and admittedly it angered me at first and I didn't know what the hell it was until watching the special feature on the DVD. But now I think that's part of the film's impact. It makes you want to know more about it, and I'm dying for a sequel to this movie. But maybe I should be careful what I wish for. Cloverfield is a movie where you need to be in a certain mood to watch it, and I think you have to have a taste for monster movies where you're not terribly concerned with knowing all there is to know about the monster to truly enjoy it the way I do. I love Cloverfield. It's a very unique movie, and I think it's arguably the best monster movie of the decade. It's super scary, intense, interesting, and has some truly great CG that's thankfully underutilized. The monster and the destruction it causes look very realistic and horrifying. However, the movie does have its problems, the uninteresting human characters, sporadic pacing, and at some points gimmicky use of the camcorder idea. So with this said, I'll give Cloverfield a 4 out of 5. Definitely check it out if you're a monster movie fan, and even average moviegoers should see it if you're in the mood for a really scary movie. Thanks again everyone for your patience for this review. Life has been a real bitch to me lately, but for now I think I can go back to not tearing out my hair every day with school projects and homework. So on the next Zmmr, we're going to go back to the age of giant ants and flying saucers when we take a look at a classic alien invader flick with The Thing from Another World. Thanks a lot for watching. Zazubaar out.